Welcome back, travelers. And as you can see, Joe is doing his facial exercises. Say hi, Joe.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Got to work out my face muscles for when I interrupt Ricky spontaneously.
Yeah, that's a thing. It's going to happen. So basically, what we're going to be talking about today, as you saw on the previous day, we did Legendary Lore, we talked about vampires and basically the way vampires function on Innistrad. It is worth noting, one thing I didn't mention then, but is really important now, is that a vampire on Innistrad is not dead. They are not undead. Everywhere else, they tend to be basically undead, cold, unliving creatures. Sure, they
That's
may be cold.
one thing I was making. Just like, doesn't one end up making a church? How do you do a church if you're a? Oh, okay.
Well, what's important about that is that when it comes to the spark of a planeswalker, they need to have a soul intact. And so it's because of that it's important for Sorin to not be dead. Otherwise, he couldn't be a vampire.
That's why they couldn't kill off Elspeth.
Yeah, exactly. Because if Elspeth were to be dead, there'd be no way she could come back. For instance, they brought back Gideon. He would only be able to come back as a creature or a god if people believed in Gideon in Theros, but that's a whole other
Do you know
deal.
how many people believe in Gideon? It's possible. But anyway, we're not going to go into Theros. It's going to end Legendary Lore with another Ricky rant. We don't want that yet.
That is a great point. We'll get into Gideon, trust me, but not now, not today, not this month, not this year, actually. But we will get into it. What's important now is that we're talking about.
If you guys request it, we'll get into it sooner.
True.
But you know,
so
let us know in the comments below.
Basically, Sorin's main thing that we know about him after his trauma happened is that he met up with a lithomancer named Nahiri and a super epic colorless dragon named Ugin. Kind of realized that there were these creatures called the Eldrazi, these eldritch abominations that were born of the ether itself. You may remember that I just talked about needing to have a spark or needing a soul to have a spark. Well, you need a spark to travel between universes, the different planes of existence. But when it comes to Eldrazi, they are literally they exist in that space where nothing else can exist. It's what makes them so crazy as far as the concept goes. And you're only seeing vestiges of them in the actual planes that they consume. So what Nahiri, Ugin, and Sorin decide they're going to do is they're going to figure out a way to trap the Eldrazi. They wanted to, some of them may have been like, hey, maybe we should kill the Eldrazi. And Ugin's like, no. We need to capture them.
We don't do that here.
But the only way that they could possibly imprison them is that they made a tasty enough looking planet. And it just so happened that Nahiri's planet was super, super tasty looking. Did I say planet?
Yes. But you're not completely wrong.
Also true. Fun fact, sometimes planes are comprised of a singular planet. Other times they will have celestial bodies around them.
Okay.
So like in the case of Mirrodin, it's a singular planet with 5 suns.
One of them's evil.
Yes. But if you go to Dominaria, there's actual planets in the area because it's that massive of a place. Anyways, Zendikar looks super tasty to these 3 Eldrazi. Ulamog, Emrakul, Kozilek. And the 3 Eldrazi are like... And so they show up and they start nomming on Zendikar. And it's at that point that they do their deal. Sorin uses his blood magic and he kind of anchors them, right? And then Nahiri uses her lithomancy to imprison them, to lock them into place. So she created shackles for their now physical forms that Sorin created. And then Ugin, he made it to where there was a spell that could actually affect them. Because under most circumstances, they have the ability basically to warp magic that touches them. Any of the 5 colors of magic basically are irrelevant, especially against something like Emrakul. But Ugin was able to use his colorless magic to warp things and properly coax them basically into a giant Pokeball, being Zendikar, of course. And all 3 Eldrazi were captured. Yay. No problem.
We'll never have to deal with them again 3 more times.
Well, some centuries pass by, right? And the Eldrazi break free. And when that happens, Sorin gets called by Nahiri, because Nahiri was like inside. We can look at Nahiri's point of view later, but just for now, just know Nahiri was basically inside Zendikar and could feel the Eldrazi coming up, and she was like, ah, snip. And so she basically busts out and she looks around and she's like, the Eldrazi are coming. We have to stop them. Sorin, I need you to help. And Sorin doesn't answer. To make matters worse, there were also the vampires on Zendikar where there weren't vampires before. And so she immediately thought, this is Sorin's doing. He made vampires of my people, of my Zendikari people. And a whole bunch of other stuff went down like that. Also, her entire world is basically already shattering. And so she shows up and she's like, hey, Sorin's, what he's dealing with at the moment is realizing that vampires are basically spreading like a wildfire. And because of the way they worked at that time, they were basically just hedonistic monsters. And there was nothing that could stop them. The humans, yeah, they had like wooden stakes and stuff like that in some cases, unless of course they've been turned to artisans and they were like, oh, thank you, Mr. Vampire, for helping me make my house. So basically, there's this graph you could make. It's the kind of graph that you would see for an ecosystem where there's too many predators, right? And usually what happens is the predators will start eating the little rabbits or whatever, and it'll start to go down. And as it goes down, the population of the whatever predator, like wolves, will also go down with it because there's less to eat, so they starve and they die. And that's kind of the problem here, except that vampires don't die very quickly. So instead, they just get more feral and they eat more humans, which also means that more humans die. And it would get to a point where we would basically hit an event horizon where there would be no more humans left. And when that happens, what happens to the vampires? Who, I remind you, are still alive.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, they get angry.
That's right, Joe. They starve to death. And the vampires...
That would make me pretty angry. I'd come back and haunt whoever didn't feed me.
Sorin knew that the vampires were going to go extinct if he allowed the humans to go extinct. And so what he did is he crafted an angel called Avacyn. And we'll get into more on Avacyn's bit in a few episodes where you'll get to see the whole deal about angels and their whole storylines and stuff like that. But suffice to say, Sorin created Avacyn specifically so that she could use her basic, like, because he was an old walker, so he had godlike powers. So he imbued her with those same godlike powers, and she was powered specifically by faith.
So this is still before the mending.
Yes, all this is happening before the mending.
Okay.
Which we could talk about in another episode as well.
Guys, request the mending. I want to hear more about it too.
Yeah, the mending is super cool. So basically, the magic of faith is what allows her to have of Avacyn to give her power out to others, and she herself is strengthened by faith. And so the whole idea is that he creates this little feedback loop so the humans are constantly just strong enough to not get wiped out. They're not so strong that they can kill all the vampires, but they are also not weak enough to where the vampires overrun them. He intentionally creates a stalemate so that both species can survive.
So he basically made like devotion before devotion was thought of.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the most black-white thing you could do. It's just like, you're not going to win and you're not going to win. We're both going to not lose.
Just imagine just going up to the vampires like, these humans must live. Not that one, actually.
That was not the only thing he created, though, Joe. Not just Avacyn.
Can he make demons, too?
No, because the demons already existed, such as Shilgengar. What's important is that he recognized that there needed to be a way to deal with a threat that Avacyn herself could not stop. Something of an equal or greater power. And he recognized Nahiri's prowess as far as using stones and such to capture things, because the Eldrazi were crazy. And Sorin knew if the Eldrazi showed up on Innistrad, it would just mean terrible things for everyone. It's enough to drive an angel mad. But basically, he created this.
A decoration in your room?
This is called the Hell Vault. The Hell Vault was created specifically from a sliver of the silver moon of Innistrad and was used in such a way that anything that could not be destroyed was instead contained. And that was kind of a thing that he put into Avacyn's mind when he crafted her. He wanted her to be aware that which cannot be destroyed must be contained. And that kind of became her deal for dealing with demons. Because if you kill a demon, it just eventually comes back. Now, again, the Eldrazi start to move around again on Zendikar. And Nahiri had dealt with it alone, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she shows up and she's like, hey, Sorin, what's the deal? You and me are supposed to be friends. I was calling Ugin. He's probably dead somewhere in a canyon. But
I hope he doesn't have a twin brother that wants him dead. Named him after garbage, and now he just wants him dead.
And so basically what winds up happening is that they get into a fight. It's a super epic fight. And there's like, he's using his sword. He looks like Alucard from Castlevania. And she's there and she's throwing rocks and she's got like 1,000 swords around her made of stone. And everything just keeps going around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, Nahiri tries to kill Sorin. She's so filled with vengeful rage. I was going to call it Vengage, but that made no sense. It's vengeful rage.
Vengage.
Vengage. For when you really got that itch you can't scratch. So basically, eventually Nahiri gets thrown into the Hell Vault. Like
Oof.
that was the only way he
so
could
she
do
came
it.
to him to fight.
Yes. Because she was
he was
upset
ignoring her. He wasn't going to go to her.
Exactly. He kept ignoring her and she shows up and she's like, what are you doing? Eventually Dak Fayden
Trying to
shows
save
up.
my lineage. Hopefully it won't die out and I'll have to get married to some crazy chick later on just to save my bloodline. But
And so from that point, we have a few other adventures happen. We have him going back to Zendikar. He works with Nissa. He is basically her guide. That was his first appearance chronologically as far as the sets themselves. And I'm not going to talk about all that because that's more Nissa's story than anything else. And
that's when he's mono black though, right?
Yes, he was mono
And
black.
mono black fits there because he's just a vampire there. He's not a vampire trying to save his own ecosystem in a black-white fashion.
Exactly.
Just, hey, I'm a vampire. Yeah, I'll help you.
The black-white part of him is more the part that kind of gets past his callousness, because up until this point, the most black-white thing he did was creating Avacyn, and that was specifically so that his people wouldn't starve to death. And over the course of the sets, you've kind of seen a bit more of the black-white aspects of them. There's also the fact that at the time they had no idea what they were doing with any of their characters. For instance, Nissa was an elf supremacist, and Sorin was mono black.
Oh, we just talked about this in the previous legendary lore.
Yeah. He goes to Tarkir later on. He has a whole deal with Ugin, but Ugin comes back from the dead, basically. And there's two separate timelines. When we talk about Tarkir, I'll talk about it in relation of the two different timelines. And I have a few ideas for how we can release that. But as far as that goes, that basically catches us up to the set Shadows over Innistrad, which that's when he returns, basically, after everything that's happened.
They haven't done regular Innistrad?
Well, that part doesn't really concern Sorin. Like, he shows up, but his story isn't like really important in that instance. Really, all he does is he discovers that she's not there, and then he fights Tybalt. And that was basically it as far as that storyline goes. So we'll
revisit Innistrad when we go back to Innistrad for this legendary lore. Okay.
The next legendary lore will cover the Shadows of Innistrad part when we get to that, but we're still kind of setting up the world. This was just about Sorin up until this point. We have other things that Sorin did, but we'll get there in a bit. Also,
you may call him the Lord of Innistrad.
As long as we're talking about Sorin, his sword is called the Parasite Blade.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because basically what it does is whatever it cuts, it feeds off of the mana. And so if he just nicks something, he can turn that thing to ash in seconds because it sucks out the soul, basically.
Gotta catch them all.
But that was a problem because he may or may not have lost it at some point in the future that we'll get to.
Okay.
So take it away, Joe.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, go ahead and leave us a like. Just hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to catch our next legendary lore. And leave a comment about
What you would do if somebody told you you need to come and save the world from a bunch of eldritch abominations, and how you do it.
See, it's a good thing that never happened to Ricky and I, because then Ricky would have to come to my home plane, and then I'd have to trap him in the Hellwell, because I wouldn't want to do it.
I might have been killed by my sibling.
I believe that one.